Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Olsem Wanem. I'm Florence John Duo. This week we will be placing the spotlight on climate change and its impact on the country's food security. Climate change is real and is the greatest environmental challenge facing the world today. It is having a significant impact on the food security in many countries, including Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is vulnerable and will continue to be when it comes to climate change and food security. Domestic crops have been threatened by climate change, such as change in rainfall patterns and intrusion of salt water into fertile land.
When you look in terms of food security, we look at the three components. One is an issue of availability of food. How does the climate change affect availability of food that the people require to eat? In terms of how it affects the minimization of the production of the food so that it fails to become available. We also look in terms of how does the patterns of people utilizing that food is going to be affected when people actually see the impact in terms of production that is reduced, where people have to actually diversify and try to change their food. So when you look in terms of the area of the availability of food, climate change can actually affect the supply chain, because the food is actually minimum on the market or it's no longer available. And then it minimizes the food that is available. And then the ripple effects are issues that have got to do with nutrition, because the food, when it is actually minimized in terms of its supply and it's not adequate, it also has got ripple effect in terms of the nutrition. It affects nutrition. Also, you've got a problem that you've got to do with health emanating from that. So climate change impact catalyze a chain of reaction of various problems that are likely going to result, which are linked to the issue of food supply.
Sustainable agriculture is vital, and the types of crops being planted by farmers need to improve to adapt to the changes in climate that is hitting hard.
When we look in terms of the migrant population that we are working with here in the country, we've been trying to look in terms of how do we promote sustainable agriculture in terms of in relationship to the impact of climate on the agriculture sector. One, we are looking in terms of precipitation, which is rainfall. How do we deal with crops that can withstand decline in terms of rainfall? So we actually try to promote crops that have got one, fast growing duration, and two, they require minimum amount of rainfall. But three, they also can actually be high yield crops. So basically on those three aspects, we try by all means to make sure that each household diversify into sustainable agriculture. People should actually understand that it's no longer business as usual. The crop that they were used before, when the climate was okay, might not be actually be able to make it to be relevant today. So they need to diversify to move to other crops that can actually be compatible to the current climate that is actually changing. And then also, people should actually see the types of the seeds that they're actually planting, because that's another component that we've been looking into. How best can have people have quality seeds that they can actually plant to sustain agriculture. Because most of the seeds that people were planting, they've got low yields in terms of production, which in turn affect the food supply that they require. And also, we look in terms of other nutritional value that are required, because some of the species of the food is now becoming extinct. Not all the varieties that used to be there in PNG are still available today. They've been affected by the impact of the changes in climate. So given that scenario, the people need to have alternative food or crops that they can plant that can replace those ones that are no longer there.
With the country's diverse geographical areas, knowing the strategies and mechanisms that will work in either the highlands or coastal areas is a must-know for Papua New Guineans.
production is linked to the whole management cycle. And let's focus on the production that we are producing per hectare, and that is going to sustain our agriculture and is going to mitigate the impact of climate change. For the people in the Atoll Island, they need to start to relook in terms of diversifying their method of attaining food security, because those are the areas that have been affected by changes in climate and sea level rise. All their activity that they used to do, they are changing. But if they manage their situation, they're going to make a difference in their lives. So you find that the PNG has got various regions which are affected by climate change differently. All these regions need to come up with a strategy that is specifically based on their context and come up with local solutions that deals with their context. For example, if you're in the highlands, you look at the impact of climate in the highlands region, which are issues that have got to do with frost, and you manage the impact of frost on your agriculture, and then you can actually sustain agriculture there. But when you are talking about coastal, it's management of the sea level rise and saltwater intrusion into fresh water and also into crops. How best do you manage that? And for the Atolls Island also is the same. The land is actually being eroded and the islands are becoming smaller, but the population is growing, but the production is very low. How do you increase on production? So our methodology that we've been bringing in, which is the keyword garden, diversifying of crops, looking in terms of master farmers, contact farmers, extension services, developing manuals and practices are part of the solution to the problem. And if the people take them on board and uphold them, they are going to achieve food security and we are going to end hunger in PNG.
The focus now should be on adaptation as we continue to face climate variations that have disrupted food production. We have to accept the sad fact that climate change is real and we can only adapt to the changes and come up with strategies to address the food insecurities we are facing. After the break, we talk about strategies in addressing climate change and food security in PNG. Since the negative impacts of climate change on food security are so evident in Papua New Guinea, we have to look for relevant strategies or mechanisms to see how best they can work for Papua New Guineans. The Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, are working in collaboration with all other partners in strengthening the capacity as well as formulation of policies to address food security.
One of the support that we are providing to the Department of Agriculture and Livestock is the development and implementation of a national food security policy and action plan. So within that plan, it also identifies the climate change risks and issues and also possible interventions within the agricultural sector at the national and provincial and district level to adapt or mitigate towards the effect of climate change in the agricultural sector. So that's one example. Another example, a policy initiative that we have with the Department of Agriculture and Livestock is the development and implementation of a national e-agriculture strategy. This strategy is being developed in partnership with, it's a partnership between the Department of Agriculture and Livestock and the Department of Information and Communication, and specifically the National Information and Communication Technology Authority. These two agencies, one that works on ICT and agriculture, partnering to see how we can harness information communication technology to promote agricultural development. And of course, this includes how do we harness the potential of ICT to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change.
Using technology to improve or help people with early warning signs is a way forward.
How do we use, information on changes in climate, weather patterns, agriculture productions, how do we communicate that effectively to farmers through extension? So one of the things that we would be piloting under this National E-Agriculture Strategy is to try and bring together all these ICT tools in a specific region and see how we can make use of that to help farmers prepare for climate change.
Research and policy formulations can be done successfully in this area, but if these policies are not fully implemented for the benefit of the people, then all the time and effort spent on this will be considered a waste. This issue of climate change and its impact on food security needs everyone to cooperate and work together, starting from farmers right up to the highest responsible authority in the national level.
This is a whole people-centered approach in terms of climate management. The scientific evidence is available already. But what we do to manage what we have been provided by science is actually what matters. To me, for Papua New Guinea, we have got resilient communities who have got skills in agriculture. But now we need to perfect in terms of area of increasing production, diversification of agriculture, and trying to mix the food that is available to become more nutritious, and also work in terms of how to manage preserve conservation. When you look, for example, for PNG, they receive over 3,000 meals of rain in other locations. Other locations receive less than 1.5, but it's above 1.5, which is a lot of rain. What we need is proper early warning systems being in place to make sure that if we are going to have an impact of climate on agriculture, people know what action to do. For example, if we are going to have a drought that is induced by climate change, people should know that before the season comes, our crops that need a longer period of time and they require more precipitation, if we are going to actually plant crops that require less rain, we are going to have food. So people need to plan based on early warning system or information that they get through early warning system.
Another important aspect is the management of land and crops.
We look at also in terms of conservation agriculture on how best do they do the land management, how do they do their crop management, how do they actually minimize impact by hazards that are induced by climate to their crops. So for example, if people were planting their crops in floodplain, and there's increase of floods in the area, which is one of the impact of climate change, how best can they do their land planning to make sure all their crops are not planted in the floodplain, but they're in a safe location? And that on its own is a way to mitigate the impact of the changes in climate, which induces flooding in those areas. The other component that we also look into is about areas that are along the coastal areas, where there's actually salinization of soil. There is actually impacting in terms of sea level rise, which actually put saltwater intrusion into the coastal areas. So to minimize the seawater intrusion into crops, we actually promote the keyhole garden, which are raised above the ground, which can actually minimize the salt water affecting their crops, and then by that it actually increases the yield. And the other thing that we have looked into is about training, capacity building of the farmers themselves. The skills that they were using before might not be relevant today. So we're actually trying to build their capacity through training on how best they can actually practice safe agriculture, but also that is relevant to context in the country.
We continue after these short messages, taking a look at how climate change and its impacts had an effect on women and their roles in agriculture. As well as that, we take a look at the collaborative effort needed to address this issue. Climate change and its impacts cannot be reversed. Strategies to adapt to these changes have to take place. In most, if not all, Papua New Guinean societies, it is the woman's duty to look for food to feed her family, day in, day out, especially in rural areas where they heavily rely on subsistence farming.
We're also looking in terms of the impact of agriculture on women, in terms of climate change. Because when the climate change affects these crops, it also affects the gender roles of women. How are they really affected their lives, the way they were living before and today? Their pattern of how they were going to search for food is changing because of the impact of climate change in terms of their sources of food. So all those aspects we look in terms of how they affect the whole society and try to build the capacity of the community to prepare and to manage it and to be able to move forward. Not actually for them to be caught unaware, but being able to manage the situation.
Collective collaborative effort is needed to at least minimize and work around the negative impacts climate change is having on PNG's food security.
To me, I see a whole government approach as the solution to the problem, because each government entity has got its own responsibility to make sure that the food is available for everyone. So if all government departments that are responsible for all civil protection issues in the country, they do their role, we realize that we'll be able to manage this situation. It's a problem that is there, but the management of the problem is what matters. And a collective approach in terms of the whole governance approach of the management is actually what is key. And also the participation of the affected population with the whole management system make the whole process to become more effective. You know, effectiveness of the management of a problem, it actually requires synergies, it requires collective effort, it also needs everyone to work together towards a common solution. It's a common problem that affects everyone, but others should not see other people, blame other people, but they should be in a position to try to find local-based solution for local-based problems. And that approach is the only thing that can work. We have departments like NARI that are working on research. They can actually try to provide proper seeds and proper crops that can withstand the impact. But without the Department of Agriculture, which is also responsible for the delivery of the services and essential services to the people, to do that, NARI's efforts might actually be fruitless. So even the government, if they provide funding, if other government entities doesn't cooperate and make sure they do their role, we are not going to achieve anything. Same with the farmer who is the recipient of the plant. If they don't manage the crop that they receive from NARI, no matter how good the quality they are, we are not going to achieve any result. So to me, I look at the whole processes from the inputs to the processes to the output that we are going to get. What is more important is to have a climate-compliant agriculture system that is able to produce adequate food that is nutritious for the people to live as per the SDG number 2.
For those who have been experiencing these drastic impacts of climate change and have been left homeless, never give up. There are committed people and organizations working to make sure these impacts are minimized.
And to me, we are looking at specialized groups which are migrants. You know, the migrant population in PNG, we have about 72,000 migrant population who have been affected by various climate-related hazards. But we are saying to those people, they should not see themselves as people who are desperate. They should see themselves as people who are champion to mitigate the impact of how climate has affected them. And that on its own is the only way to go. And to me, it also needs leadership. Leadership is actually the most important aspect in the management of this whole process. Without leadership, people will perish. And without leadership, the management is always slack. So the issue is to make sure we have responsible leadership in the management of the climate impact, both at local level, at subnational level, and at national level. There should be people who should be responsible, who look into this thing into perspective and try to find solutions that can actually deal with the situation and manage it in the country. And we can do it in PNG. We have got the personnel, we have got dedicated people, we have got favorable climate that we can actually model and come up with a solution. And together we can do it.
Join us after the break as we feature a short film by Senda Cow on how to make a keyhole garden. And that's all for this week. If you have any comments or stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email via the address now showing on your screen or visit our Olsem Wanem Facebook page. Until next week, I'm Florence John Duo on behalf of the entire Olsem Wanem team. Thank you for watching and have a pleasant evening.